Hey everybody, this is Nick from Nick's Listening Space, and today we're going to talk about a couple of products from EPZ Audio, their TP35 Pro USB dongle DAC, as well as their Q5 Pro. Now the wired IEMs, I should say, do come in a 3.5 millimeter variant with a microphone, as well as a 4.4 millimeter balanced version as well. Now, today's review is not going to be a traditional review in the sense of reviews. Rather, I want this video to be about kind of my experiences with IEMs and really reflecting on the main differences between IEMs and, say, speakers, or really what is the difference between this kind of experience and kind of the two-channel hi-fi experience that I mostly promote on this channel. So let's get started today, guys. Now, if you were to ask me what my ideal situation is for headphones, I would probably tell you that open back headphones would be my preferred kind of headphone listening experience. I still think with open back headphones, it's still much more of an in front of experience rather than a in your head. And so I haven't used in-ear monitors with a very long time. And so when EPZ asked me if I would like to review these guys, I was excited to do so because I thought it would be a really good kind of test to kind of go back to something that I remember. Because really, for me, this is about returning to a format that I mostly associate with the iPod era, and asking myself, why are IEMs so popular today? And I also think IEMs generally sound different or fundamentally different from speakers, because I think the thing is, IEMs don't evolve out of hi-fi, but rather they evolve out of necessity. And the iPod was really that moment when they stopped being this professional tool and really became a cultural one. And so in the beginnings, or before IEMs were something you could buy online, or before Sony JVC started making IEMs, they were something that people would wear on stage. Because live music is chaos. You have drums that are trying to bleed into the rest of the track, or guitar amps that are pointed the wrong way, or those little floor wedges creating feedback with like the guitars. Oftentimes you have vocalists that have to really crank up their vocals to hear themselves over the rest of the band. And so for decades, monitoring the audio while playing meant fighting volume, essentially with more volume. And the problem that IEMs were trying to solve were just that. It's the issue of isolation. So they weren't designed to create soundstage or create a sense of musicality or even to create a sense of vibe. Rather, these guys were designed for control, to create isolation, to create consistency, and most importantly, to create hearing protection. Because early in-ear monitors were essentially survival gear because they were tuned for intelligibility. Again, they weren't designed for pleasure. They were designed to sound mid, forward, and lean. And they were more about keeping the singer in key than about experiencing immersion. Essentially, IEMs were not designed to create space, they were designed to eliminate space, which I think is very different from speakers. So when we jump forward to, say, the early 2000s, I think this is really, for me, where I see a shift. And the iPod didn't just change like how we bought music, it changed what kind of listening devices made sense like for that time. Because essentially this idea of space, or lack of it, right? Essentially, music moved out of the room and into your pocket. Listening became solitary. It became about portability, and it became about having constant gratification or instant gratification whenever you wanted it. And so I think suddenly the things that mattered the most weren't about scale, air, or depth, or trying to replicate a live experience, but rather this idea of isolation and efficiency and convenience. So, over-ear headphones never disappeared, but I think the iPod revealed how they were bulky and how they were hot and how they were socially visible. and about how they work great with things like buses or working on trains, right? But earbuds and eventually IEMs just fit so perfectly into this new posture of listening in a portable fashion. And so I think the key point here is that iPods, at least to my knowledge, I don't think made IEMs better, but they made them necessary. Essentially, that device promoted a much more affordable, portable kind of solution. Because before then, nobody in their right mind would have considered buying a piece of professional gear for a consumer kind of need. All of that is a very roundabout way of saying that I think the iPod culturally normalized these style of headphones. I tend to theorize that this kind of cultural movement or transition from space to isolation probably had a profound impact on the art itself. Because I think listening collapsed inward and music stopped being something that was played in front of you and became something that was inside of you. Rather, this was not about having shared space or not about having distance between speakers or room. Essentially, this is just about having music directly injected into you. This can be looked at in many different ways, I think, because I think for some people this might be a downgrade, and for some people this might be a far better trade-off. And so there's this kind of entire generation, I think, that grew up with the iPod and with these IEMs that never really thought about the impact there or haven't really fully quantified the impact. I think that if you come from a speaker-based mindset, I think that this shift is massive because speakers assume a room and they assume distance. They assume that sound that interacts with the walls, with air, with furniture, and with you. And IEMs don't assume any of that. They essentially just assume isolation and intimacy. They assume a world is noise. And music is something you escape into. And so, that's not necessarily a criticism, because I think under this kind of philosophy or design philosophy, music no longer ceases to become a performance that we witness. Rather, we become a part of the performance. As with devices like IEMs, we're literally allowed to walk around the world, and it is through these devices we modulate our experiences with the physical world. These allow you to either isolate yourself from the physical world, or it allows you to, dive deeper into your own internal world. And there's profound impacts that I would imagine sociologists and much more smarter people than me can look at and analyze and understand the profound impact that these guys have had on society as a whole. And it's just something that I think about as a product of the iPod generation and as somebody that grew up with this style of earphone in my ear 24/7, 365. In the late 2000s, like somewhere around 2008, 2009, 2010, I think is when we see this big explosion again in over-ear headphones and open back headphones. But still to this day, I think IEMs are everywhere. There are thousands of different models of these. There's a new one every other month or every other week. There's constant debates online about tuning them and EQing them. And the question is why? Why are these so popular over speakers, over every other form of music? And I think that it's just the condition that made these IEMs so useful in the iPod era never disappeared. They only intensified. This idea of living in smaller spaces or shared walls or shared rooms or late night listening or desk listening sessions, listening at your desk. I think that the popularity of the computer and having an office or an in-home office or a desk is something that most people today can relate, whether it's a desk at your job or it's a desk at your school. This portability factor ultimately wins out over everything simply because of the convenience. Because these don't care about the environment. They don't ask for permission. They don't require your walls or your room to be treated. They are just a working device. You know, something that is really interesting about IEM culture, I think, is this obsession with optimization, because people online really do obsess over graphs and target measurements and value per dollar. And I think a lot of that is because these are not asking for a room, right? The room is not a part of the equation in one's review of these. And because of that, there's just far more repeatability in your ability to measure and study them. And so in that sense, I think IEMs reward accuracy, or they reward clarity. But I think that there is just something fundamentally different with IEMs than speakers. And so, you know, my experience with these, having to return to these and use them for a period of time, is that my first thing I notice with IEMs is the bass. The bass on IEMs is very different from most other headphones or speakers, and it's because it's so deep and clean, and it's immediate. There's an immediacy here with IEMs that you don't get with speakers. And again, it's the lack of space. Speakers are asking to travel across airwaves to then hit your ear. These IEMs do not have to contend with the atmosphere or the environment in your space. And so because of that, for such a low price of $100, you're going to get something that's incredibly impressive. You just fundamentally don't need to spend as much money when we use something like IEMs versus speakers. And it all gets back to that idea of not having to interact with air or space. Essentially, everything is here, but everything is also kind of inside your head. Now, that's a design feature, not necessarily a failure. Essentially, if we were to compare IEMs to speakers, IEMs will give you the content. Over-ear headphones will give you a window into the sound. And speakers give you context. None of these things are interchangeable, rather they answer different questions. And that's why I don't think it makes sense to judge IEMs by how close they sound to speakers, because I think that that's like judging a sketch by how well it photographs. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the USB dongle DAC, because in a setup like this, the DAC's job is almost boring, and that's really a compliment here, because a DAC in this setup needs to be clean, and it needs to be quiet and pretty much invisible. With such a portable setup like this, you don't really want to have a big DAC associated with this setup. Rather, this small little portable one, I think, fits the bill just perfectly. Because in a sealed system like IEMs, the transducer and the fit of them really dominate the overall sound or the overall quality. Rather, with IEMs or with this type of setup, we find that the upstream chain disappears faster than it does with speakers. And that's not to say the DAC doesn't matter. And I do think that with a better DAC, these headphones do scale up quite beautifully. It's just that I think in this setup, they matter less, because again, I'm not trying to find the best possible listening setup. Rather, I'm trying to find the most portable, convenient setup. And so who is this setup for? Really, this is for somebody that, you know, seeks portability and convenience over everything else. When I think about IEMs today, I don't think about them as small hi-fi. I think about them as a response to a world where space is scarce. Because IEMs come from a world of control. They were accelerated by the iPod, and they thrive in the modern life because of the conditions we face today. Now today, I don't judge IEMs by how much they sound like speakers. I judge these by how honest they are in their approach to audio, which I think is one of convenience and portability. And for that, I think that the EPZ TP35 Pro USB dongle DAC, as well as the Q5 Pro IEMs, have been a real pleasant treat to listen to. In my time with these guys, I've had no major issues and no major complaints. If I had one thing to say about these guys, is that I do think that the USB dongle DAC is a little underpowered for some other devices, like say my over-ear headphones. I think that your mileage may vary with those. And just to compare it a little bit briefly to the Etsy USB dongle DAC that I recently reviewed, the Etsy USB dongle DAC has more power on tap and can drive, my other headphones much better than these can. And so if you're intending to just use, these type of headphones with these, I think that this works really well. So that's about all that I'm going to say in terms of sound quality on these particular IEMs. If you like this style of review or this very different approach, please leave a comment down below and tell me so. If there's another pair of IEMs that you would like me to review, I'd also like to hear those down below. And so yeah, if you have any other comments, please leave them down below. Thanks so much for watching, and please hit that subscribe button, guys. Thanks so much. Bye-bye. Hey everybody, this is Nick from Nick's Listening Space, and today we're going to talk about the